The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
Oh, get in. Take two.
Nice. Yeah, we're very professional.
Oh, all right. Well, welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and no coronavirus.
Well,
we don't really know that.
Sure.
I mean, I got tested, so.
Yeah, it's just like what we were just talking about. As soon as Noah knows something, it immediately becomes common sense. It's like, well, I know that I don't have it, so...
So by proxy,
know?
you guys that do not live anywhere near me also don't have it. So that's how that works.
That's okay, because I've been mailing coughs to your address.
That's what those weird empty boxes are.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure no one here is in the age range where it's a real difficulty. Oh, man, this coronavirus sucks, huh, guys?
So, in light of that, I mean, we do have another episode pertaining to that, but in light of that, we decided to talk about the cosmos to get the fuck off this planet.
Yay!
Oh, specifically,
super fun.
Specifically DC. So we decided that it would be good to focus because, you know, they need to have their time to shine. So we're going to specifically talk about DC cosmic landscape and how they do that. And then eventually we'll get to Marvel and then maybe some other stuff. I mean, we talked about Saga enough that I think we got the indie stuff down.
Yeah, I think it's ironic that we're doing an episode about space when we are all like in the smallest spaces we could possibly be
like
in.
We feel like we're in a space shuttle just trapped, and
we're trying to dream big here. We're trying to leave the planet.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like projection. We just all really want more space. So it's like, let's do something about space. It's like wish fulfillment.
I hope it happens.
Other preliminary comment, cosmos in ancient Greek means harmonious arrangement of things. Bam.
I don't know if it's
more bang for your buck.
Is it harmonious though? Isn't it like just chaotic and kind of scary?
That's the point. It's like for the Greeks, we had a cosmos, which means the world is inherently rational. You can kind of understand it because it's arranged like in a harmonious way.
Interesting.
That's the idea. Yes.
That's beautiful.
I know, isn't it sweet? And that's what DC's universe is like. And it really kind of is, if you think about it, because it's constituted by very specific sort of groups and stuff like that. And we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
But
so what?
I was really glad to do this.
I do want to say, like,
ahead,
when
sorry.
You guys first think of like DC cosmic comics or landscape, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Stars. Stars. That's what it's about.
Okay, I have a slightly better answer. Starfire?
There you go. Star Sapphire.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
It's true that, like, for me, like, the big part of this, like, I don't know, subgenre, I guess it's a subgenre, is the star background, which is just that it takes place in space. And when we were thinking through, like, the episode, like, for trying to think about, like, what the DC universe's cosmic space is, it's different from Marvel because Marvel has a tendency to sort of, like, just have characters out in space a lot. And a lot of that's just because of, I know this is weird because it's so arbitrary, but a lot of it's because of the Heralds of Galactus.
Right.
Like, they just have the Silver Surfer and a bunch of characters that sort of just, like, they're not living in a planet, you know, they're not just, like, spacefarers. They're just these, like, cosmic star-made people things.
Just
you know?
floating
When
around.
I think of, like, the cosmic levels in DC, I normally think of singular characters that are normally, like, well, the only member of that entire race you see. But when I think of Marvel's cosmic landscape, I like think of entire races full of people and characters that they utilize. So it is just kind of completely different in terms of even how aliens, quote unquote, are used.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, because I mean, whenever I think of DC, the first thing that doesn't come to mind is their cosmic characters, or at least how they do space, because they don't typically do it often. And I think like one of the big points to it is, I believe we were talking about this when we were thinking about the episode. It's like, it's kind of hard to talk about cosmic stuff in DC because a lot of the characters are from the cosmos, but don't really go there.
Yeah, no, that's like perfectly said, because I think the issue is that there are aliens in DC a lot. DC, and maybe there's something to be said for this is why there's less stuff out in space, because there are so many heroes in DC where they're just from a particular planet that's well established and then cut to that planet when we do the adventure. And it's not that like, and the analogy that I was using before too is like, if you want to kind of get a difference between what I see as those two subgenres, the kind of like, more cosmic stuff and versus the on the alien planet stuff, it's like Star Trek versus Star Wars. Where, Star Trek takes primarily floating in space, and they'll go to planets every once in a while, but that's mostly dogfighting and, everything like that, whereas Star Wars is usually on some planet.
Right.
And then they might have like spacefaring, but it's usually transitional or something like that.
Yeah, it's like this. The Star Trek is like the journey to there, when Star Wars is the journey once you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But that's not to say DC doesn't have a fair amount of these characters. It's just that they sort of like, what I think is interesting is that they kind of are genre crossing. So one thing that I've noticed, like when you take like abstract characters in DC, what you get a lot is more characters that sort of are on the magical end, right? I mean, not totally, but we should at least address this. There's like the Spectre, and there's the Phantom Stranger and characters like that. And like those, interestingly enough, are like very Judeo-Christian. It's like God's wrath and things like that. So it has kind of like, it is cosmic in a sense. I mean, like they are planet destroying if they need to be or something like that. But it's also takes part in this other kind of like subgenre of like angelic, heavenly, celestial stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like there's technically cosmic, but it's like that upper level of cosmic stuff. Because like you don't usually associate like, I guess Jesus and stuff like that with space, even though like heaven isn't.
Even though it would be so cool, space Jesus. And I think, and I'm not even being blasphemous, I just think it's like that would be a better motif. Like, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus, but he's like on a rocket ship and he has thrusters and he shoots lasers out of his gun. So,
why would he have a gun?
Bless. Well, it's like it's got a stun setting. So
okay.
You take a shot and you learn a lesson.
So heaven is the Enterprise, is what you're saying.
Yeah, phasers set to love.
Gross.
Yes, real gross.
I know. I'm just picturing that as like what literally is the Christian faith is it's just the Enterprise, and Jesus is the commander of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys need to stop, or you're going to ruin Star Trek for me. I love Star Trek, so shut up.
I mean, there is Q, and he is very godlike. But anyway, also another similar. You have like the 5-dimensional imps, which are, and I was going to say this is like more on the magical end. So like Mr. Mxyzptlk, or how do you say his name?
Mxyzptlk.
I've never been able. Yeah, if I was Superman, he would kill me every time because I would just never be able to. But yeah, he is this sort of abstract cosmic-ish character. Maybe not so abstract, but definitely like reality-altering, crazy.
Right, but he's like in the
planet.
Yeah, he's in the 5th dimension. So it's like, I mean, is that even like space as we would consider space or the cosmos? You know what I mean? Like it's a different layer of it.
Yes.
I love how matter of fact Noah said that too. He's in the 5th dimension.
The 5th one, okay? The 5th one. Yeah, no, it's interesting because it's definitely one of those things where it's like it fits the concept, but I think this is interesting, not so much the aesthetical motif, because I think this is as much about like literally we're going to have our characters in space, whether they're the kind of characters like Superman or Captain Marvel, Shazam for the layman or whatever, who can like fight in the vacuum of space, or it's going to be, people in like ships, or like it's when Batman wears his cool like face mask, what I mean? Like when he goes to space, he's got to have his like little extra suit.
It's like, is his suit always space airtight? Because like sometimes he just puts on like that breather, and it's like, well, okay, I don't think that's good luck, man.
Yeah,
I don't associate Batman with space at all. So when we were like, we're doing an episode about cosmic characters, I'm like, I can't do Nightwing. I can't do Tim Drake.
Kayla's like, okay. Kayla's like, okay, Nightwing and a rocket. Gotcha. That's what it's about.
Space exists.
That one time Batman sat on Metron's chair. That's what she's gonna do. Yeah. So I mean,
but
go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. Well, I wanted to put out there that there is also something interesting about this, which is I feel like this is a genre that's almost like, or a subgenre that's almost unique to comic books. It's such a big part of both Marvel and DC and a bunch of independent comics. Like, I would say, it's hard to like draw numbers, but let's say like 10% of the comics that come out in the superhero genre are these kinds of characters. Whereas like you really get this less in other mediums because you need in a lot of ways, you need super powered characters to be able to do this. Like to go investigate or have a boxing match next to a supernova, you need a character who's powerful enough to be able to just be in that environment. Right. And I think that's kind of cool that like, if you don't read comics, this is a place that it's not really something you might be overly familiar with and you're not yet appreciating or something like that.
James Bond can just hurl his victim into the sun, but Superman.
Yeah. God.
But we've talked a lot about like sort of what isn't the case with DC Cosmics and stuff like that. But I thought like, well, let's talk about what it is. Like what do you get? And there's a few franchises, let's say, that really do kind of dominate this space.
Like three
and the vast majority
big
of our
ones.
Yes. And the first one has got to be the Green Lantern Corps, or the Green Lantern generally, and then the everything else that follows.
I mean, their power literally comes from this giant lantern battery in space.
Correct.
And most of their core are aliens, so I mean, it makes sense.
It just follows, yeah. And I think that it's like in terms of like where their power comes from and its kind of constitution, they're like the only ones in this entire in all of DC that I think, I mean, in this major way that is just like kind of cosmic. Like I know that's sort of a weird thing to say, but what I mean is like they're not magical, they're not gods, they're not aliens with super technology. It's like harnessing the stuff of the universe.
The point is that they're space cops.
Right.
So they fight in space on different planets with different types of aliens.
and that green energy is just like it's like a Schopenhauerian thing where it's like the will brings the universe into existence or something like that. Yeah, it's cool shit.
I do want to say I like, so I don't know if any of you read Far Sector with it had recently come out. I can't remember what issue it's on currently. I have the first 3, I want to say. And it was with the new Green Lantern. And there's a section of space now that they're exploring. And Justice League Odyssey did it too. If you haven't read Justice League Odyssey, you should. It has Azrael,
really good,
Cyborg, Starfire, Jessica Cruz, and Darkseid. Yeah, I was like, who's the other member of that team? Darkseid, funny enough. But they're like in the furthest reaches of space where people usually don't go, and they made up this like, I guess, MacGuffin or this reasoning behind it. It's like you can't get past it. There's like a ghost sector, and then there's like other space. But so this Far Sector comic is like exploring other reaches of space that they haven't seen. So I feel like DC's trying to open up their cosmic landscape a little bit, because if you think about it, there's just countless stories to be told. You can literally make up anything. So, like,
well, and the truth is that they have a bunch already, and I think that in a way they'll always be at a kind of like, if you connect them to Marvel, a kind of deficit. But not because they can't tell stories. It's just, it really has to do with like where their characters are and who their characters are. And I think I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think Green Lantern, like the thing we're kind of talking about now, is sort of shows that distinction. When, I know this is weird, but like when cosmic stuff happens in DC, one of the, like I said, the main sort of ways that we explore that sort of space, like literally, is through Green Lantern comics. And then whatever happens in that space, in those stories, kind of gets subsumed under Green Lantern stories. You know what I mean? Whereas like when stuff happens at Marvel, that stuff is sort of just like, it'll be cosmic stories, but connected to less dominant, less popular heroes, like again the Silver Surfer or so it feels like that stuff is a little bit more like independently disconnected from any one specific hero. Whereas I would say, and this is kind of the point I wanted to make about Green Lantern, is that like the way that we have explored the vast majority of the DC cosmos is through like Hal Jordan and Kyle Rayner and like the Guardians and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, just not to talk about Marvel too much, because we'll have the time for them. But one thing I've noticed,
it's too late. It's too late.
One thing I've noticed that is also a difference is, like you're saying, so most of the cosmic landscape that we've seen, or comics or stories, is through the vehicle of the Green Lanterns, or New Gods, or anybody else that's like that are just homed in space. But Marvel does have the tendency, and I like this. If you've read even the most recent Doctor Strange, where Mark Waid was writing it, most of his comic, at least the first like 2 trades, all take place in space. So they take a character that was based on Earth, but then throw him into space. And I feel like Marvel does that a lot. There'll be a character that's typically home base or earthbound, and then they'll throw him into space for a while, and then they'll come back. So like, it's interesting when they do that.
And that's a great... And that's, absolutely. And that's a great example of like the different dynamic, because like that's Doctor Strange story in a lot of ways is like a story of like Doctor Strange out of his element.
Right.
Like it's him, but he's got to deal with Galactus. What's he going to do? But in with Green Lantern, it's like, that's where, as Kayla mentions, he's a space cop. So that is exactly where they're supposed to be. And as a matter of fact, in Grant Morrison's run right now, there's a lot of like hilarious moments that come from how comfortable Hal is with aliens, where he's like, "Oh, you're from Zebulon, nice try. I know you have 4 faces." Shit, you know what I mean? He just like knows instantly. Yeah. You hate turmeric. I got it. Yeah.
Yep. And another one, because you had mentioned franchises that are typical to the cosmic landscape in DC, the Legion of Superheroes is very cosmic. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. That comic it's always been weird to me that comic hasn't gotten more love than it should. Brian Michael Bendis tried to do his stuff with it, which is good. It's good right now because there hasn't been more than 5 issues. Because we all know when Brian Michael Bendis, when he does more than 5,
they haven't had time to ruin
exactly.
it.
Then it's going to start getting weird.
Well, but to be fair, I think that comic plays to his strengths really well, which is why I love it. I shit on Brian Michael Bendis as much as the next person, but like, but he does have these wheelhouse, and having this ensemble cast, and honestly, Legion of Superheroes is pretty light,
right?
Like the tone is very like often kind of silly, not totally without its drama, but it's very like bantery, and I think that's what he excels at, which is again why I think that it's so good. Recommendation, anyway.
But I like that. I like that comic not only because it does take place in the cosmos or in space, but because of where it takes place. So you have like human type characters are in it, but you have a whole like repertoire of all these aliens that join it, because they're in space and because it's like the central hub to be the Justice League, or, at that time in the future, what the Justice League is. So it's really cool that they like recruit new people, and you have all this rotating cast of people, unlike the Justice League that we currently read, or that's in current times, where it's typically just people that are based on Earth, even though most of them could be aliens, they live on Earth. So it's hard to say like, oh, this is cosmic. Well, it's not, because Martian Manhunter lives on Earth now. So does Superman.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
and when those characters are spacefaring to the degree they are, they're usually like most of our story will just take place on that alien planet. The other thing, like what you mentioned about Legion of Superheroes, is sort of true, and it's almost sad because you mentioned they're kind of underappreciated in certain respects. Like I think a lot of it is if you don't know the Legion, especially if you're like a Marvel fan, you don't DC that well. It's in the future, right? So that has a tendency to isolate them from the rest of DC sort of continuity and the main story and stuff like that. And I think that has a lot to do with why people are less familiar and stuff like that. On the other end, they can do all kinds of other cool stories that have to do with like time and like, a vision of what the DC universe is going to be. Another thing I love about right now, the like Brian Michael Bendis's story is like what the Earth is. Like the Earth has just been completely destroyed, but they've created like some weird like facsimile using lasers or something like that to like rebuild.
But then you read the story and you're like, oh, Jonathan Kent is older now. That's cool. Why?
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, and I think one of the reasons that they do so comfortably fit in this genre is even though the Legion of Superheroes comes from like the concept is that it's like a superhero from almost every planet in the known, like let's say galaxy or mega galaxy, the 19. I don't know. I never know in space like what their sector is or whatever. Like Guardians of the Galaxy at Marvel. Like it's like, isn't this bigger than a galaxy? I would think.
Guardians of the Universe.
Anyway. Yeah, I mean that's way lamer, but it's very 80s. But anyway, yeah. So the legions from all these different planets for sure. But the thing is that they are kind of like, as Noah mentions, like a nexus between all the planets, and their main like the way their like badge is this flight ring that gives them all the ability to fly and be in the vacuum of space. So it just speaks to the very concept. And then they have just some characters that are straight up like Starboy,
Saturn Girl.
And,
that's so cosmic.
Yes, exactly.
Planet. Yep.
Yes, exactly. She might as well have like Saturn earrings or something.
And then I guess one last example before we move on to the characters we picked that are cosmic faring would be the New Gods. And I mean, we're not going to talk too much about them because they deserve an entire episode on themselves. But I mean, their stories always take place in space because that's just where they are. So, I mean, you read anything with Big Barda, Mr. Miracle, usually Darkseid, depending on if he's on Apocalypse, Granny and the Furies, they're usually going to be in space, and it usually takes place in space. And it's funny because most of the time, any time those stories happen, or like our normal heroes or our staple heroes are, I guess, involved with the New Gods, it's always the boom tube. Nobody else that has the ability to travel will use it's just always the boom tube. I always think it's funny that when the New Gods are involved, it's just boom tubes. That's it's so like
it's just faster.
Yeah.
You're gonna boom tube. You're not gonna fly. What you're not a peasant.
Well, I mean, Green Lantern has the ability.
They're not called. Yeah, they're not called the new peasants. Okay. Look, that's the genius of Jack Kirby too. I mean, just on full display. And the reason the New Gods are interesting in this respect is that they really do sort of cross genres in this fantastic way. Jack Kirby had written Thor and had done a lot of work in creating that like kind of like a comic mythos that like incorporated the gods into superhero comics. And then he gets to go to DC and he creates these characters that are kind of gods, like in the mythological sense, but they're happening now and out in space. And it's also like these more sort of like kind of, I don't know, just like seculars are the wrong word, but like they're like, I don't know, like Buck Rogers meets Hercules,
right,
or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if
and so
I was gonna say, I mean,
ahead,
just
sorry.
as like a kind of a cool thing to know about the podcast. I mean, when I was designing the logo for the podcast, I love the New God so much, and Jack Kirby's interpretation of it. That's what the logo is inspired by. So, just wanted to throw that out there. Fun little fun fact about the podcast here.
I didn't even know that.
That'll if we ever make it, that'll be like a big piece of trivia one day. That'll win you the prize
of a sticker of the logo.
And just one last thing.
maybe a tote bag.
But just one last thing on the New Gods. I think the way that they fit into the genre is kind of cool too, because like, some of their characters are really more direct sort of translations of what you think of as like, God, like
Zeus.
More like Olympian, exactly. Like, and they have these two planets, New Genesis and Apocalypse, and they're warring back and forth. They're good and evil. You get it. And High Father functions way more like Zeus. But then you have characters like Orion or Light Ray or Fastback to some degree, who really do feel more, or Infinity Man for that matter, who really feel like they're more at home in these sort of like, like they would, I don't know, come in contact with the Starship Enterprise. More than they would like beheading the Nemean lion or something like that.
Right.
So it does like kind of, depending on what character, it kind of fits on like how cosmic they feel when you read them, and if they're likely to punch Superman in the face.
I mean, it's true. I mean, one last thing is usually the cosmic level, I guess, characters or whatever that are in DC Comics, usually all of them can punch Superman in the face. So it's like he's not so special once he leaves Earth, and that's probably why he stays.
Well, Toy
just
Man
don't like Superman. Okay, just say.
Yeah, Toy Man can punch Superman in the face too.
I was going
to
say, whether or not they win is a different question after they punch him.
Whether or not they shatter every bone in their arm and hand, but
yes. But that is true, and we probably should have mentioned that up top. But you probably get it anyway. That power level of this genre just usually starts at a higher level for just a very mechanical reason of like, do you have to be so robust to just exist in the vacuum of space, or you have to be like set up specifically empowered to be able to do that. So, and then to zip around space, you're probably going to be pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
Probably going to be able to kick Superman in the nuts.
Balls of steel. All right. I guess we'll move on to our picks. So I was really racking my brain on like who to pick or who we should pick. So we decided to pick people that are like most of their adventures or I guess who they are takes place in space. So it's not like Superman where he's from a different planet and he's on Earth now. It's more, they could be from Earth, but most of the time they takes place in space. So like Green Lanterns or whoever.
Right.
So that was the parameters that we picked him in, just so I guess you, the listener, understands why we picked the characters we did and we didn't pick more popular or more well-known ones.
Yeah. Yeah, well, also it's fun to not pick well-known.
Exactly. I mean, we typically don't. We like to mix it up a bit. Like, Jared, you want to kick us off?
No, but I will. I don't mind going first, but I will say this is the most obscure character I've ever picked.
For sure.
So my character is Captain Comet, and I was describing it to these two. Just that I feel like he's almost like a reclamation project for me, because I think the core of this character is really amazing, but he's also very confusing, and I'll explain. But like he has a lot of extra stuff that doesn't make sense. Anyway, so his name's Adam Blake, and he goes way back. So it's written in 1951. And Strange Adventures, June. Not that matters that much, but I think this is just a piece of trivia. This is the first instance of a mutant in comics. Isn't that crazy?
But he looks like a human.
Yes, he looks human, and you associate that more with Marvel,
right.
Obviously. And I think that people have this assumption that, like, oh, they created the X-Men after ripping off the Doom Patrol. They created the X-Men, but they made mutants. And that's not the case. Now, there were some earlier characters like Namor the Submariner that predates him, is described as a mutant, but he's not described as a mutant until later.
Right.
Into the, I think, the 70s or 80s.
And I think the distinction,
anyway.
I think the distinction with that too is, especially when those characters that are now considered mutants, when they were describing them, they were more using either the word mutant or describing them that way as being different and not necessarily what Marvel would use as mutant later on.
Well, exactly, and I don't even know that they use the term mutant here, but the difference is the latent genetic, like it's just in your genes and you're just inherently special. And the idea is, before this, for the most part, characters like who had straight up superpowers were gods, were from another planet. So like Superman, or they had an accident with radiation or something like that, like the bomb, or whatever. So this is like the first example where it's like, oh, it's just his genetic sort of thing. It did involve a accident though. So anyway, his name's Adam Blake, and also 1951, so much Superman ripoff stuff. So his parents, who are kind of important to this, are named John and Martha Blake. So they have the same first name. yeah. and you're gonna find yes, too many Marthas. That's what when they first met. They was like, oh, Martha, I love you. We have our moms the same. It's cool. He works as a reporter. His girlfriend is Lois. He has a best friend, Jimmy. Okay, then none of that's
I was
real.
like, wait a second.
I think my brain shut off for a second there.
But okay, so the way that the character's origin works basically is that like there's a comet that passes by on the moment of his birth. Okay. Yeah, exactly. It's awesome. And that the radiation from that comet activates very weird specific genetic yada yada in baby Adam. Baby Adam, and begins to give him powers from right from the get-go. Like as soon as he's a kid, he starts basically it sort of begins with he's like super smart and has crazy ass retention powers and memory, and he just kind of knows stuff. You know what I'm saying? Probably a real creepy kid. You know what I mean? Where you'd go over, like, it's like your friend's kid, and you're like, hey, nice to see you, Adam. And he's like, I know the capital of Idaho. Like, I hate you. I hate you so much. Little kid.
I like how you think that knowing the capital of Idaho is the creepy part.
But yeah, when like little kids just like brag about their knowledge, and you're like, that's so weird or whatever. Or they look at you in a haunted way.
So he's clairvoyant, is what you're saying.
Kind of, yeah. But clairvoyance implies like knowing the future. He kind of does a little bit more like he just knows things. And actually, this is the kind of power like cosmic characters will have a lot, called like cosmic awareness, which is a kind of mystical sort of thing. Captain Marvel in like the original Captain Marvel had this power too. So he just sort of like the universe just tells him stuff. It's very Marianne Williamson. You know what I mean? Just. Yeah, but anyway,
awesome.
so he just knows stuff, and then as he gets older, his he like kind of like develops more powers, like extensions of mental sort of stuff, telekinesis, telepathy, that kind of stuff, and then some basic like superhuman strength and durability, and
he
then
is
as
stacked.
is like he is stacked, yeah, and right here I want to pause this, so to speak. If you're aware of Captain Comet, you've seen what he looks like. The reason he's deeply misleading, if it's not become clear, he doesn't have comet powers. Right. He's called Captain Comet because he got his powers from a comet.
I mean,
and moreover, when he's when he's flying around and he's got this like energy halo, that's his telekinetic power. It's not comet energy, and that's why I think the character's sort
dust of ice. And...
Yeah, it's like
yes, yeah,
that's
not
such a tell though. Like, I mean, if he was fighting villains and he's like, "I'm Captain Comet," and it's like, "Why is your name Captain Comet?" Well, when I was born, a comet flew. It's like, okay, so let me look up when a comet flew so close to Earth that it gave you these powers, and then I'll find out who you are. Like, God.
Yeah. Well, that would only narrow it down so much, but
more than you.
But anyway, I mean. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But the point being is that like I think it's put this character in this weird space because like even I just thought that he was like no offense. It's a space that you might describe as but But he just doesn't appear the way he is, if that makes sense. His like basic aesthetic is in conflict with like what his powers actually are and what his story is. So he is kind of conflicted. But I do love this character, the idea, and he's had conflicts with Superman every once in a while. He's even in like the New 52.
Yep.
Quasi recently. They tried to change his look because his look was too Buck Rogers-y. But anyway, so anyway, he has these powers as like a young person, and he's like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I should figure out what's going on. So he goes to a scientist. You know, in the 50s, you just could know a scientist.
Yeah,
you could just like, hey, let me get. Yeah, you're like, let me talk to my neighborhood physicist or whatever.
I don't think I've ever met a scientist before.
I know, yeah. They're elusive. They're like Bigfoot. You know what I mean? You'll see one wandering in the woods looking for Bigfoot, ironically.
They don't really leave their labs.
True.
No, but so he goes to this guy, Professor Emery Zacro, which is an awful name to write and say. But anyway, so Zacro figures out his powers, and like he deduces that this is a really cool phrase. Another reason I really love this character, he has a thing called reverse genetic atavism. So the whole deal with his powers, the reason he has all these stuff, is that when the comet flew overhead and activated his genetic sort of specialness, he is the peak of human evolution. So he is what we're all the species in its perfect potential would be. So the idea is like later on in the future, we'll all be like, you know, have mental powers that put us on peer with Superman. So it's kind of a cool thing. Yeah, it's kind of cool, right? And atavism, if you don't know, I had to look this up. I'd heard of it before, but like it's the idea when you have like vestigial things to your form that related to when you were like your ancestors earlier. So like male nipples or something like that. You know what I mean? Or like people with webbed toes or whatever. You know what I mean?
Lobster
like,
claws.
When we were reptiles. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or tails. You know, having tails, that's a good example. Like sometimes people are born with tails, you know, and we used to kill those people with fire, but not now. No, we can't do that. But yeah, so that's basically Adam Blake, Captain Comet, and they've really struggled with him. They've like changed his name to Comet a few times to see if that would stick. Because like, why is he a captain?
I've read him like very small bits, and it's usually like in the showcase collection type stuff. So who's his main villain? Does he have one?
He doesn't really have one. No,
just the comet. Just the comet that gave him powers.
Honestly, yes, and no. Actually, Superman is like not the only one. I'm talking about he's gone up against some stuff, but like you mentioned, he's been in teams like Legion and Rebel. These are acronyms. I don't know. You know, they're basically these teams where it's like, and this is what puts him to the cosmic thing. Not just that he's named Comet or whatever, but that he usually gets inducted into these like ensemble casts of teams that are, you can tell, and I actually love this format in comics when they just like authors like, I want to use these 9 characters, and so I need to come up with a story that justifies them all being brought together, and then I'll write that. And so a lot of times it'll be like they're creating a defense force against like, you know, evil cosmic shit, like bad aliens or something like that. And that's usually when he kind of gets inducted. Or sometimes there'll be like a big cosmic threat. And then Adam Strange or somebody like will be like, hey, come on, Captain Comet, you're a character in DC who can get in space. Come with me.
Do you want to know what Rebel stands for? I only know this because the character I'm doing is also in this group.
Please, yeah.
Get ready.
I'm ready. Don't say it. I remember reading this and be like, oh, that's lazy as shit. Like it was it's like S.H.I.E.L.D.
So
go ahead, yeah.
It's Rebels, so Revolutionary Elite Brigade of Eradicate Legion, but Legion is also an acronym. Within this acronym, Supremacy. And then to also, I can't remember what Legion stands for though. Do you know?
No, let me look it up real quick. It was like
here it is.
Yeah.
So within this acronym of Rebels, there's also Legion, and Legion also means Licensed Extra Governmental Interstellar Operatives Network.
Yeah, see, that's a little better. Like that's a little better in that it does sound like the words are like you would have written those words out and then like figured out a way to make it an acronym.
to,
But like
like,
the content is
Put
correct.
it all together. It's Revolutionary Elite Brigade of Eradicate. Or is it Licensed Extra Governmental Interstellar Operatives Network Supremacy? That's the entire.
Yeah, because if I remember, the idea is Rebel was an offshoot of Legion,
Right.
and Rebel is like a more like badass, we're gonna go kick ass group. That
Yeah,
was kind of
Blackfire
the
was in it.
idea that I gleaned.
So
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so it's like, so anyway, I guess they've really never known what to do with this character,
Obviously.
and even his own, he's had a few like miniseries and stuff like that, and it's usually him sort of like going on into space, and sort of defeating stuff and coming back or adventuring generally. There was even early on, he even though he has his powers, they also gave him a stun gun for some reason, and you could tell it's just like they were trying so hard to like do a Buck Rogers thing.
he has all the
But it's just-
superpowers. Why does he need a gun?
Exactly. So it didn't really make sense. But what I like about the character is I like the idea, the sort of opposite of genetic atavism, that he's like this, the future character, and that he's this cosmic character that isn't connected to these sort of other main franchises. So like he's not Kryptonian, he's not a Green Lantern, he's not some sort of mythological approximation or something like that. And I really hope that we get something new, because he'll pop up every like decade or so. And I'd really like to see them like kind of, especially a really good writer like you mentioned, Mark Waid or something like that, somebody like that, to get on this character and kind of bring him into the future. I think he could fit in.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
So that's
they would need to.
that's Captain Comet.
They would definitely need to scale him back a bit and refine him to like, I guess, make sense.
So in seriously, the recent appearance in I think it's New 52. I don't think it was Rebirth, but is a really good. I mean, they changed the costume, so he looks a little bit more like grandiose. He's got a cape and stuff like that, and he fights Superman. It's really fun. I think that they've done it conceptually.
Right.
Like they've kind of gotten away from like the Buck Rogers. It kind of looks like a poor man's Adam Strange thing.
Hey.
And they just doubled down on poor man, like as in a bad version of. What I'm saying is like, so they kind of like created something that I think would have legs, which is like, okay, it's just kind of the mental powers. And also, just real quick, I like that the mental powers are like, he uses them physically a lot. Because a lot, it's like, if you got the Jean Grey or whatever, it's like mind fucking or what. That's not the way to say it. Anyway. And,
That's not what she
and like
does.
moving stuff with your mind.
You're thinking of Emma
But
Frost.
he uses,
Emma Frost does that.
but he uses, yes, but he uses his telekinesis to enhance his own physical being. So I think that's another like kind of like it's kind of an original kind of way of going about it. So that's Captain Comet.
Yay.
Wow.
Man, when I said mind fucking, that really set you two into a tizzy.
I don't know anything you said after.
As a full tizzy. You guys are
well,
at a maybe 1.2 tizzy.
I don't like that either. So on the Adam Strange note, that is the character that I decided to spotlight. I don't know when else
Enter Noah.
I don't know when else we would really be able to talk about him. Tom King and Mitch Gerads is currently doing a series with him, which has only had one issue. I don't know if it's coming out
So good.
soon. The second issue, it's so good. The first issue is amazing. I mean, this team, if you've read Vision or Mr. Miracle, this team is going to bring out some good stuff. I'm not talking about Heroes in Crisis. Let's forget that even happened. So definitely pick it up.
It feels very much like an extension of Mr.
Yes.
Miracle. Like, not that it's the same story, but like if you liked that, I'm really excited about this series.
So Adam Strange, he is a science fiction superhero, obviously, because we're talking about space, and most of the time that's science fiction. So he's created by Julius Schwartz and Murphy Anderson. Murphy Anderson was the one that did the costume design. And just as a little fun fact, Schwartz actually rejected the drawing from Anderson and then had somebody else commission one, but Anderson's costume design was the one that stuck. So I thought that was always funny when I was researching this, that the creator of the character was like, no, I don't like that costume. I'm going to get somebody else to do it. But then Anderson just kept doing it anyway. So it's like, no, we're going to keep this. So if you don't know what he looks like, it's a very, I don't know. He looks like the Flash, but in space, but with a more like coned helmet. If you want, if I could, I guess if that paints a picture, like he has like yellow gloves, yellow boots.
He looks like, it looks like Spaceman Spit.
Yeah.
You know, like Calvin's space guy.
Yeah. And like Jared had mentioned, him and Captain Comet do look similar, only in that their colors are white and red. So I guess that was a space theme for back in the day. I don't know.
Also historically it's just Buck Rogers, right? It's all these
say
sort of,
Buck
they're all
Rogers
trying to
one more time.
Buck Hey, fuck Rogers, okay? Yeah, I said.
But
I mean, but the point is, like, that was a very popular, like, kind of subgenre of like fiction, was like this sort of space opera kind of stuff, and this is clearly DC's like their early and probably most successful attempt at like translating that. I think Adam Strange is beautiful in that respect. Like he's a time capsule character.
So he premiered in November 1958. So he's been around for a while in Showcase number 17. So the gist of the character, so he's an archaeologist, which is kind of funny because he's more based in the cosmos and as a superhero. I don't know how archaeologist equates to being a master marksman with weapons and being able to fly with a jetpack in space.
We don't question these.
Yeah. Can you say Indiana Jones? Can you say that? Why has he got a
comics.
Whip? How does he whip? Yeah, exactly.
So he was teleported. He was working in Peru. He was teleported from there to the planet Rann, which is where pretty much all of his stories take place via the Zeta beam. So this is one of my favorite things about the character, because they found a way to use this, beam of light that transports him to this planet as a big part of the character, and it drives a lot of the stories. Yes. So to explain what this beam is and why it decided to pick him or what happened. So what's his name? Sardath. It's a kind of odd name to say. He's a scientist on Rann, and he was trying to find a way to communicate to other forms of intelligent life, but it turned out he just made a teleportation beam. So technically it did work. Like he brought the intelligent life to him to communicate instead of just using a radio.
Hey, no one's putting his scientific acumen into question.
No.
No one. We love this.
So
guy.
when he was teleported to Rann the first time, he was ambushed by a bunch of people, and this mysterious lady had saved him, and then she brings him to Sardath. So Sardath is her father, and this character is Alana, or Alana, or I don't know how you want to say it, but every time I say it, I want to say it.
You got to say it like that.
No. Every time I see it, Alana. It reminds me of Saga, so I'm just like, don't say that name.
Yeah.
And true. So fast forward a little bit, him and this Alana get married, and they have a kid named Alia, or however you want to say that. Also, there's way too many E's and A's in that name.
It's pronounced Scooter.
Yeah. Scooter. And Sardath is her father. So it's really cool. So he gets there, and he makes this group. He finds this group. He's given all this equipment that give him the ability to fly with the jetpack. His suit has a number of abilities, surviving the vacuum of space, creating, I don't want to say these Green Lantern type hard light projections, but he has the ability to like make these like extended arms with the suit. So he has that ability. He has his ray gun, which is his staple look. He always has it in his holster on his side. And most of his stories take place on Rann, and it's with the Thangar War, and he becomes a superhero there. But the biggest...
Can I just say real quick, if you're a big fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, this is really where Star-Lord comes from. Like this guy who zips around with a jetpack, has blasters and a spacesuit. That format that really gets perfected here. So if you like Peter Quill, you gotta give it up to Adam Strange.
Exactly. No, I mean that's true. I mean, a lot of these characters, that are like, I don't know, the swashbuckling adventurers in space.
Rogue.
They draw
Space Rogue.
They draw a lot from this character. But the coolest part about this, and why I said I like the Zeta Beam a lot, is because it creates this plot with him where the Zeta Beam is temporary. So he gets zipped back and forth with a temporary time. So whenever the Zeta Beam is going to be activated or he gets beamed up to Rann, he's only able to stay there for a short period of time. Sometimes the time varies. I know they tried to do like, it's only 14 minutes or something like that he's there, but it's, it varied with writer to writer. But a lot of his stories actually were trying to make it permanent. And when they did make the first Zeta Beam permanent, it actually created a sickness and made pretty much the person that was traveling through it mentally insane. So that's a really cool story arc. You go with it.
By the way, as opposed to physically insane. Well, where it's like, his arms are coming out of his butt. He's physically insane.
You don't know. You never know. And then they changed it to where some drone was able to do it, and then they did perfect it, but then it got destroyed. So, it's the Zeta Beam is really important to this character. And it's a really cool
and such a cool idea too.
Yeah, that he can only travel there for a certain amount of time or a certain amount of, the duration of it can vary, but he's considered a superhero there. He helped win the war. I believe it was like the Thangar Holy War is what it was called. So it's really cool. It's a really interesting story of somebody from Earth being transported there and then him essentially being brought into that culture and saying he's from there now because he spent so much time there that he's saying, I'm from Rann. I'm a human, but I'm from Rann. So it's interesting. I like him a lot.
Yeah, that's a real common theme in DC for some reason. I don't know what it is. I think somebody's got to have written about this, but like these characters that are like from two different places and kind of unsure about their birth. And I don't know if that's because there's a lot of like immigration going on in the 30s and 40s or before that, or if it's World War II or something like that. But yeah, because like, Aquaman has this,
right.
Yeah. Superman has this going on. Martian Manhunter, and Adam Strange, where it's like they're like, is their adopted home more their home, or is their their bio home, so to speak? Yeah, it's really. I think that's really
cool. And that's why I thought this was interesting too, because it was the reverse. Because most of the aliens call Earth home because they go there because their planet's destroyed or whatever. But Doctor Strange was the reverse.
He
went to another planet and he calls that home. Currently in the Tom King one, it's kind of reversed a little bit in the other way, that him and his wife are now on Earth, and you're finding little by little, like, is all the things that he did on Rann true or not? Because he's like a best-selling author now. I'll let you guys read it. I won't spoil it, but it's really good.
Yeah, it's so good. But you're right. I didn't think about the fact that he's in. Like he reverses that, and it's also similar to we were talking about the Legion. It's kind of why Adam Strange is a bit cut off from other DC stories, is that his stuff is taking place literally not just in space, but just not Earth, like in this other planet.
And then I guess a little bit more on him. He has appeared in a live action in that Krypton show that was on Sci-Fi. It was like a very little tiny glimpse of him because he didn't have a suit. He was like, my name's Adam Strange. It's like, okay. Where's your jetpack?
Yeah, that's so annoying. I'm Cassandra Cain. You look chubby.
Hey.
I don't know if you are, but
but in good news, so HBO Max that's coming out, the streaming service with DC and HBO, there's going to be a show called Strange Adventures where Adam Strange is the main character. So
great, another streaming service.
Hey,
I didn't
super excited for it.
What is this?
So HBO Max is they're essentially going to be like Disney Plus in a way. But since HBO is part of Warner Media, they have all of the properties of DC and Warner Brothers and all of that. So DC's having...
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a Green Lantern show coming out too.
No. Sorry, I knew all that. I didn't know that they were doing an Adam Strange one. That's fucking great. Excited. That's fantastic. And Tom King's stuff is really going to like juice that, I bet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like that series is going to be big, just in terms of like its critical
We'll see.
appraisal.
Hopefully, it doesn't turn out like Heroes in Crisis.
Well, he's just allowed to go crazy with this shit, and nobody cares because people aren't as into Adam Strange. I just want to say too, before we leave Adam Strange, if I had to write a list of top 10 characters people don't know about that they should, Adam Strange would be real high on the list. He's like way better a character relative to his popularity.
Yeah. And he looks cool. I'm just saying. So that's Adam Strange.
Clap, 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 applaud.
Hell yeah.
Well, Noah's late for work.
It's fine. I'm good. Keep going.
Okay. Well, last but certainly not least, I chose a very interesting gal, because women are underrepresented in general, and especially on this list of cosmic characters.
True.
Yeah.
So I'm going with Fatality. One, that's a fucking awesome name. Her code name, it changes. Well, kind of. Anyway. She goes by, again, alien names. I'm going to pronounce it Yara Sinril.
That's how I pronounce it, so...
Cool. We didn't even.
It's actually my mom's
that.
maiden name. It's my mom's maiden name.
She's possibly unheard of to the very casual comic book reader. She's very popular within Green Lantern stories, or at least like major events with Green Lanterns. She was created by Ron Mars and first appeared in the Green Lantern Volume 3, number 83 in February of 1997. So she's actually kind of new to the comic book stage in terms of how old some of these characters can get. She is from she's the oldest child from the planet of Xanshi, and she's, of course, part of the ruling family. This is very Starfire-esque, by the way. She goes off to train with the warlords of Akara. And while she's out training with warlords for some reason, because that's a really good skill a future ruler should have,
Warlord class.
Yeah. Just being badass and super terrifying. But while she's off training, she's apparently the only person off planet. Xanshi, her planet, is destroyed. And during this time, the Green Lantern John Stewart was in charge of protecting that planet. He went whoopsie, and her planet was destroyed, which makes Yara/Fatality the only survivor of her entire planet. So she vows revenge on all of the Green Lanterns because she doesn't know which one was responsible, so she just hates them all now, and goes on to fight several of them. I'll get to her relationship with John Stewart later, because it's probably the most important to her, but she also has a really interesting relationship with Kyle Rayner. And it's while fighting Kyle during one of the many times that she does, that she discovers, because John Stewart shows up, that John was the reason for Xanshi's destruction. And after this fight with John and Kyle, she seemingly perishes, and there's no body, but there's a severed arm. And you're like, oh, I guess Fatality died. Oh, really terrible death, because that's her arm.
She completely
There's nothing
disintegrated.
attached to it.
Except for her arm?
Exactly. But lo and behold, she was not killed. She appears later in a story on Earth. She's acquired like a cybernetic prosthetic arm and a yellow power ring. She fights Kyle, who convinces her to remove the yellow ring. It's like, that's not going to lead to anything good, girl.
Hold on. I just wanted to let you know that the arm is the strongest part of the body. And a lot of times when a person is vaporized, there'll be an arm left. So,
well, okay, this is totally like side note, but during cases of spontaneous human combustion, it's the feet that are left, or a foot instead of an arm.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the feet are the arm of the leg.
Shut up.
I don't know if you know that.
Anyway, the Quadarians are the one that kind of gave her the yellow ring, and when she tried to remove it, the booby-trapped ring exploded and teleported away after it was removed, and it destroyed Fatality's other arm.
So her name is Fatality because she is constantly fatalitying herself.
It's kind of strange that this is a running theme with her character, and there's one more terrifying body part that will go missing.
She's like the Black Knight of Monty Python fame of the Green Lantern.
Tis
core.
but a scratch. Actually, I'll just tell you now. So she's fighting Vandal Savage's daughter, Scandal.
Hell yeah.
And
Scandal's awesome. Let's
No,
just
I know,
respect.
but it's-
okay.
Scandal severs her ear and eats it.
Mm.
So she's
They're
also missing.
cannibals.
She's also missing an ear.
Sorry,
There.
whenever
So-
I never heard those names together. It's like Vandal and Scandal. It's like, okay, well, it didn't. You didn't really need to think.
I didn't either for the
Yeah,
longest
you didn't
time.
need to think too hard on that name, right? God.
I don't think anyone is accusing Vandal Savage of being a creative namer. But
I'm just glad they didn't do like a feminine version because it could have been Vandala and that would have been far worse. So
True.
Yeah,
True.
that's true. Just add an A at the end.
yeah.
So over the course of her kind of history, she bounces around from being just an outright villain because she's wanting to murder all the Green Lanterns in revenge, to a bounty hunter, and she eventually becomes a Star Sapphire. So it was ha 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 when Noah mentioned it earlier, which is probably her highest form because it's the Violet Lanterns of love, ironically.
She really loved her arms. Like that's
And her ear.
here. She probably looks.
You could just see her joining.
Go ahead.
You could just see her joining the Star Sapphire, where they're like, "Okay, welcome to Star Sapphire," and she's like, before I join, I just want to make sure, am I allowed to keep my arms? That's a big thing for me. I don't want to go into it, but I like having arms."
Okay, and then I'm only gonna really read in detail one of her comic book appearances because it's fucked up.
Oh, more
And
fucked
while I
up.
was doing research, I was horrified that this has happened. So she was with the new Injustice League, as she do, back in her terrible heyday, with the new yellow power ring. She was captured by the Samurons and experimented on, became a Star Sapphire, so went from yellow to love, fear to love. That's a nice transition upwards.
Hell yeah.
She was essentially brainwashed by the light of love and became very forgiving of her nemesis, Jon Stewart. And then she was like, you know what? I think instead of hating you and wanting to murder you, I think I have romantic feelings. Now that I've been exposed to the feeling of love, I think that's what's going on here.
That happens. That happens.
Story as old as time.
So she finds him. She goes on a mission while parallel with the Orange Lanterns, finds him, kisses him, goes like, hey, you should forgive yourself because I forgive you. And it's trying to basically absolve her of her own survivor's guilt, appeasing his guilt. And after helping him on several missions, they begin a relationship. But here is the fucked up part. After one of the events of the Green Lantern comics, the invasion of the Durlons, it's revealed that a Durlon has been impersonating Fatality for months, because this happens to women characters all the time.
Shapeshifters.
Spider-Woman.
And, so John defeats the imposter and searches for the real Fatality. When he finds her, she attacks him and is like, I fucking hate you. What are you doing near me? And he was like, but we were in a relationship. She was offended that he thought that she would ever forgive him and that he couldn't tell the difference.
How confusing would it be for your arch enemy that destroyed your planet is just came up to you and tried to kiss you? It's like, what is happening?
I thought we were in love. How dare you, first of all. Also, I have to tell you, I love the idea. I really do like the idea that rage or anger or whatever, it's secretly sublimated love. And I think we should just do this. So when American generals are like, I want to kill the Taliban, be like, I think we love the Taliban. That's what it is.
Love and hate are
love 'em.
really close.
Well, yeah, I mean, because
Yeah,
both of those,
absolutely.
one of the strongest emotions or factors in that is obsession or an infatuation with it. So it just makes sense that, fucking crazy.
was.
And-
It's awful. But she basically leaves him going like, how dare you? And me and all of the Star Sapphires are your enemies, Jon Stewart. Don't even look at us.
Stop trying to kiss me.
Yeah, but
Son of a bitch.
They're better now. But
Are they?
that was just a really rough part of her history. So Fatality is a badass black woman. Again, when I was reading this, I was like, there's a lot of comparisons here to like Misty Knight losing her arm and Starfire with, I don't know why they can't conceive of aliens that aren't like hot babes with big boobs, but Fatality is pretty awesome, known for her loving hatred of Jon Stewart and losing her limbs.
Well, they can. They have two kinds of aliens. There's big boobied women, aliens, as we know, and ugly monsters. Sometimes you'll get a big boobied monster, but that's rare. That's more rare.
God.
But yeah, nope, that's Yara. That's Fatality.
Bravo.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun because like I didn't realize that she lost two arms, so that's
And
like,
an
'cause
ear.
I was like, oh, another amputee.
And an ear.
Yeah, but that was like more. That's more. She might have an award here. I don't think many people. There's a character I think called Damage in DC that's lost a couple
I can't
of arms.
stand that character.
That's pretty rare.
A
Yeah,
couple
he's
of
supposed to be an
arms?
asshole.
How
Yeah.
many arms does
Yeah.
he have?
I mean, like 17.
Just a cup of arms.
Oh,
Yeah.
Also,
okay. I
he's-
misheard. Sorry, that's much
I
clearer.
believe
Yeah, he
that Fatality, her limbs got lost on like different parts of her arm too. So like, I think her right arm only is like the elbow up, and then like the left arm is like a shoulder down. It's like it wasn't even. Like she can't.
This poor girl.
Yeah, that's rough.
Ah.
But yeah, we've been joking around a lot, but like I like the character a lot.
she's
Like,
cool.
Fatality was like a character that was big in Green Lantern comics when I started reading them. Because it was like during the Kyle Rayner stuff that she was like there'd be some Jon Stewart subplots, and she would be like a big
That's
part
where
of
I
that.
know her from.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually great that like she's got this like quest for vengeance or has been driven by that, but it's not for like some sexual reason. Like they did have some sort of romantic subplot at some point, but the point is like, a lot of times in comics, the like femme fatale character is like so misogynistically.
Yeah, like you've spurned me
oh,
in love, so I'm violent.
Yes,
Right.
I love you so much. You male hero, you're too beautiful and wonderful. I love you so much. And she's like, this isn't about you. This is about my planet.
You've killed
that you've
everyone
destroyed.
on my planet.
Yeah.
Ugh, that's great. So to wrap this episode up, we have a new Patreon subscriber.
We
What?
do?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't. I guess I didn't
What?
tell you guys. Ha! Surprise.
Surprise.
So, I mean, if you've followed us, or I mean, us as being the people that are on the social media for this account. So when we did the Saga episode, actually, he changed his social media handles to The Will because we convinced him so much that Saga was great, and he liked it so much that he changed his social media handles. So that's really cool. So
I know who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so-
He follows me on Twitter. He's
yeah, William, he's
Yeah,
been
he's
listening
cool.
to us since the beginning, and he finally got on board to the Patreon train. And as always,
About time,
I know,
William.
Jeez. But thank you.
guys, you're scaring everyone away.
It's like, I wonder why they don't
I love-
stay.
I love
No, I'm
it.
just kidding. So as we normally do, we give them a superhero name or a power or both or whatever. So we can't give him the...
He's given himself his
I know,
name.
but we can't use that because his name is William and he's the Will. So we gotta do something else.
I got it.
Go ahead. You always
I got
have
it.
Nice. You always do. I love it.
Okay. So his name is the Will, right? Or Will, and it's the Will. So I think he has like a wish granting power because he will, like it will happen. But his enemy, like he knows what they want, right? And he makes that happen. He like grants their wish, but it's like twisted like a genie. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
Like how? So they're like, oh, I wish. You'll have to connect this, but it's like, oh, I wish I was a hero, and then it's like, oh, you're a superhero, but then you get shot into the sun because that's what happens to superheroes or whatever. So yeah,
No.
Yeah. So it's like a twisted kind of genie character
So
that grants your
is
wish.
So he'd be
Yeah.
more of like an anti-hero / villain.
Oh, do I have to make him a superhero?
No. I'm just trying to.
I think it would be sadder if he was a hero and he was trying his best and everything like this, but he just self-sabotages.
His name is the Will ?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good idea because they're like, oh yeah, I really want to be like rich, but then they're rich in like calories and they get massively obese or whatever.
No.
Like, oh, your blood is very rich or whatever. I'm sorry, now you're too fat to commit crime. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, so thank you as always. And you can also be a Patreon subscriber. Will's going to be getting some fancy merch in the mail. He's going to get to pick an episode topic. We're going to shout him out on social media.
Oh, hell
yeah. You could do that too. Just go to our website or find us on patreon.com/thephantomzone.
Join us.
Join us. We do have untopic episodes on there where we kind of spitball and talk about news that are in video games, movies.
Way more sass.
Yeah, and a lot more.
Yeah.
Like, you think that we could be explicit on this one. We kind of get a little worse on that one, but it's because we could stretch our legs a bit,
Oh, yeah.
In a fun way.
way.
We can talk about what we are passionate, like super, super different.
Exactly.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can be dirty the whole time. I'm like, fuck, shit, bitch. Just the whole
I'll
time.
just bleep all of those
You'll
out.
love it.
That way they have to subscribe to it to hear what you just said.
Well, yeah, they'll just hear beeping noises. We'll hear things like beep, beep, beep.
All right. Well, until next time, guys.
Thanks,
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.